Hi.
Hello.
What's your name?
Mary, Warrington.
Jade Jones.
Ofure, Ugiagbe.
Rebecca Church.
What is your age?
I am 25 years old.
32 in 2 weeks' time.
I am 23.
20 years old.
How did you get into rugby?
Grew up watching it and loving it, so yeah, took my dad to drive me to my first session and then never looked back.
I'm actually from rugby originally, so I was always around it, but I picked it up properly when I got to university.
And me being a younger sister wanted to do everything that my sister wanted to do. I forced my dad to take me to a training session the following week, and then I just loved running around with the ball.
I played cricket beforehand, and one of my cricket mates' dad, he was running a club at Chesterfield, so she was like, oh, do you want to try out rugby? So I was like, yeah, sure. So I headed down and instantly fell in love with it.
Who are the inspirational women in your life?
There are many, many. Obviously, I'm inspired by my teammates. They're all awesome human beings, but my mum is definitely my inspiration. She's just a super strong woman.
The ones that come to mind are my sisters. They were brilliant growing up and still are now. My mum, and then mainly my teammates around me as well.
My mum, my auntie, my sisters. They probably have never heard me say that to them before, but definitely those.
Any, like, just women rugby players who have made it at the top kind of thing, like the amount of dedication and work they've had to put in.
And from a rugby perspective, who are the inspirational women, not only your teammates, but also perhaps players that you've seen, players that you've admired?
Yeah, I grew up with a few role models, Maggie Alfonsi being one of them, and Sarah Hunter, and then was lucky enough to play with her at Lightning, and so they were a big part of my journey and have got me here today to have something inspirational and to look up to.
So I'm a big Maggie Alfonsi fan. She was just an absolute demon when she was a player, but like after retiring from the game, everything that she's contributed to the growth of women's rugby has been really cool to see. So she would be one of my inspirations.
Zoe Oldcroft, she's one of my sister's best mates. We just love her. I think she's a really hard-working player. Doesn't always go for the glory of scoring all the tries, but you can see that she's always working on the pitch.
Leah Bartlett.
Any reason for that?
Absolute legends.
Have you encountered any barriers being a woman in rugby?
Yeah, I'd say the barriers I faced were quite early on in my career. I had to get my parents to travel me to my nearest club, which was about an hour and a half away. So that took a lot of dedication from my parents and time out and commitment to take me to training 3 or 4 times a week. So
I think kind of the day-to-day, I wouldn't call them barriers, but we definitely have kind of challenges around going to rugby clubs, toilets all being male, changing rooms all being male, kind of being an afterthought.
You're always going to get the stigma that women's rugby isn't as good as men's, but now with the growth of the sport, it's becoming less of a barrier. Me personally, I've never had anything bad said to me, so.
Yeah, I suppose like location and accessibility of rugby for women is probably one of the harder things, like getting girls into rugby and stuff, not having enough local teams about.
Where do you feel Leicester Tigers are from a women's rugby perspective?
I think that we are in a strong position in terms of growing ourselves as a team. We've got a lot of support behind us, and it's really good to see week in, week out at games here at Matt Early Woods, how many people we get turning up to the stadium, and it's a great feeling to have a crowd to run out to.
I think if we look at kind of the international women's setup in England, like they are doing amazing things for the profile of the sport, but then so are other countries. So we're seeing, higher levels of investment in national teams, and that can only just kind of like drive the promotion of the sport. I think locally, like Leicester Tigers coming in and doing what they're doing, creating this pathway, we're seeing more and more girls and ladies get involved, and we see young girls coming to games and young boys coming to games, and they're like, we want to play rugby because of you. So that's obviously growing the sport as well. So I think it's in a really, really strong place, and it's just really exciting. It's a really exciting time.
Especially now that we've got a women's team, it's really good. We're growing every week, we're learning every week. We've got a great pathway with Lichfield, and we get to do a lot of community stuff with the younger age group, and we see so many young girls coming to the games, and it's really nice talking to them after the game.
Obviously Tigers bringing in a women's squad is just such a great role model for women's rugby. So I don't think it's quite there yet, but it's definitely getting there.
We say Premier 15s next year. You say...
Woohoo!
Let's go.
Exciting.
What do you believe is the best way to get young girls into rugby?
I think it starts off with where are they going to see it first. So I think it does need to be introduced more into schools.
I think it's that visibility piece. I think, you know, there's that phrase, can't see, can't be. So I think the more we promote the game, the more we make ourselves visible, the more we get involved, the more we put ourselves out there, and the more that young girls can see that.
Getting the kids to interact with us on a personal level, you know, going to see their local clubs, joining in on some coaching sessions or things like that, just getting them involved in the environment, I think is really good.
Really putting the right media out there to inspire young girls and just show them that, like, oh, it's not just for lads. Like, if you want to do rugby, just go do it.
Well, from a Tigers perspective, we've got the first ever girls residential camp in Tigers history. We've got a girls-centric masterclass camp with Vicky and some of you guys coming down to help coach.
Yep.
And we've got girls camps running in 21 locations across the counties. How do you feel knowing that, having had those inspiration from such brilliant women, that you'll then be looking to be a bit more of a mentor and a role model to some of the younger girls coming through?
The idea of being a role model for girls growing up now is crazy. It's a completely different feeling to what I'm used to.
I feel really fortunate actually to be in that position, just really privileged. You know, when I talk about people that inspire me, it's amazing that I might be able to do that for somebody else.
It's definitely, it's quite intimidating because I've always looked up to everybody else. So but it's also exciting, and I like the challenge as well. But yeah, no, more so very exciting.
It's exciting to know that me personally will have an impact on possibly inspiring the next generation, and just being able to make girls eager to something they probably never have been before.